Good morning. I'm Pat Thurston. I'm in for Ron Owens today, and we're going to spend some time talking about what happened in the Zimmerman trial. We are joined by Mari. Mari, I'm so sorry. I kept calling you Mary all morning, and so if I mess up your name, I apologize. Mari Fagel, she's covering the Zimmerman trial. She's also known as Your Legal Lady, and on her website, yourlegallady.com, she brings you insightful analysis into the legal and courtroom stories that are making the headlines today. She co-hosts The Crime Line. It's a weekly web show on Spreecast with John Lieberman, a former America's Most Wanted correspondent and crime expert. She also works as a legal news correspondent for WRL Radio in New York. She's contributing to Your Legal Rights radio show each Tuesday night, and she's a regular contributor to the Huffington Post, to Yahoo, Salon, BuzzFeed, Blog Her, and Gal Time. Her legal analysis has also been featured on CNN, Geraldo Rivera, CBS News Radio, HLN Online, and BBC Radio. Thanks for being here, Mari.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for reading my long biography.
There's more to it, but people can go to your website if they want to read it all. So you've been covering the Zimmerman trial, and I've really appreciated what you're doing. I've been reading your blog at yourlegallady.com. So you were there as the trial began, or you were watching it on television?
I have been watching it on television and following it very closely, actually, since it began last year. I attended several of the protests, the hoodie marches, and I've been following it since the beginning. It has been fascinating.
Okay, well, give us a blow-by-blow. What happened in this opening? Because it was pretty interesting.
Well, the prosecution, in my mind, I think started with a bang. They started by using George Zimmerman's own words against him, and I'm not going to curse on air. Unfortunately, one of the news stations carried that live without such a warning. But he used the words that George Zimmerman said that night kind of under his breath to the dispatcher, that these, curse words, they always get away. And then the prosecution, John Guy, he proceeded to lay out their theory of the case very clearly, step by step, introducing their strongest pieces of evidence and disputing the weakest pieces of evidence. And I would have expected the same from the defense team, as I think that Mark OMara has been very strong since he took this case. Yet what we saw from Don West was probably what will go down as one of the worst opening arguments in a high-profile criminal case ever.
It was kind of comical to read about it, but I don't think there were actually any giggles in the courtroom. So he started by talking about himself?
So first he actually started by pointing out something that is important for jurors to recognize, but it didn't need to come off in the first couple minutes. He said that George Zimmerman's parents were not in the courtroom, not because they did not want to be there, but because they are witnesses expected to testify, which is fine. And then he started to talk about himself, as you said. He started to say, when I grew up, and then there was an objection very early on, just minutes in, and the objection was sustained, and the judge warned Don West. He said, tell your client's story, not your own. And I think that objection tripped him up. So then he told an awkward, uncomfortable, and I think downright inappropriate knock-knock joke in a second-degree murder case where a 17-year-old is dead and one man is facing life in prison.
So tell us the knock-knock joke. I'll be your foil.
I don't know if I can give it. I mean, his performance of it fell flat, so mine can't suffer anymore. But it was knock-knock.
Who's there?
Who's there? George Zimmerman.
George Zimmerman who?
Now you're on the jury.
Yeah, okay.
So it wasn't even a good joke, even the numerous times you could tell it over and over.
Yeah, and the jury was not real responsive to him. And then he was lackluster through the rest of his opening, right?
He was, because he had a map of the neighborhood in his hands, or that he was referring to. I wanted to just rip it from him because he was relying on these minutiae and details and getting so bogged down, just throwing out fact after fact to the jury without presenting his theory of the case and introducing his theory of the case, that it became very hard for them to follow along. And in fact, Mark OMara called for a recess, and I think he did that to get Don West back on track, because when they did come back, at least he came back a little bit stronger and started to bring up, their strongest pieces of evidence and dispute their weakest.
A lot of people are saying that this case was overcharged against Zimmerman, second-degree murder. What do you think about that?
I think it will be difficult to find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very high standard of second-degree murder. I think that there are a lot more hurdles facing the prosecution in getting that charge. Obviously, the jury can find for a lesser offense, as in manslaughter, but I do think it will be difficult for them to find that he killed Trayvon Martin with a depraved mind, with an ill will, which is what the jury instructions will read. Right.
And it's really unbelievable. Thank you, Mari. Hang on with me just a second. We're going to take a break here. 808-0810 is our telephone number. I'm Pat Thurston. You're listening to KGO.